Passing the Baton 2009 is an occasion to highlight the challenges and the opportunities facing the incoming Obama administration. On the one hand, as we speak, the Middle East is again engulfed with the violence of that seemingly endless, intractable conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. Enduring hatreds are now amplified by new technologies of destruction and the intervention of regional powers and their surrogates who are opposed to peacemaking. On the other hand, our president-elect has a unique opportunity and the reception by the world to restore American leadership abroad on issues ranging from the threat of nuclear proliferation to the effects of global climate change.
Improving American foreign assistance has never been more important to our national security as it is today. This has been a transformational period of rethinking and revitalizing our approaches to foreign assistance. As we pass the baton, we are passing on a few of our lessons learned. Planning and integrating our defense, diplomacy, and development efforts are key to our security as a nation, and our commitment to doing so must remain strong. We must continue to keep our commitments to rebuilding the diplomatic and development staff throughout the world, increasing our presence as well as deepening our expertise in languages. As we pass the baton, continue to focus on public and private interests and partnerships with all types of private sector partners, U.S. and multinational companies, foundations, universities, and think tanks. This is the strongest trend for our shared future, and in it lies the seeds for a safer, more peaceful, and prosperous world.
Henrietta, thanks so much. And we have a little presento that has a certain symbolic meaning here. This baton is in part a way of saying thanks, but when you carry it back to your office, you undoubtedly are going to meet your successor, and you might hand the baton to the successor and say, lots of luck, or whatever. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'm driven, first of all, by a strong belief that the gravest danger our nation faces today is a terror group detonating a nuclear bomb in one of our cities. But secondly, I must acknowledge that my experiences as a Cold Warrior have in fact conditioned me to be especially sensitive about the dangers of nuclear weapons. And I believe that we should begin to dismantle the deadly nuclear legacy of the Cold War. I believe that today we are truly at a tipping point of nuclear proliferation. And if the world does tip, it will be irreversible and dangerous beyond the imagination of most people. But in fact, no real actions will happen unless the governments begin to take it seriously. And that will not happen, I believe, until the American government takes a strong leadership position. And I believe that there are specific actions that President Obama can take to move us in the direction of a world with no nuclear weapons. He could use the bully pulpit of the presidency to awaken the world to the incredible danger of nuclear weapons. And I believe that President Obama would be especially effective in that role. He could invite Russia to negotiate a new treaty entailing significant nuclear arms reductions. He could seek a return to deep cooperation between Russia and the United States in mitigating the dangers of nuclear terrorism. He could work with the Senate for the ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, now 12 years after we signed it. He could propose a new fissile material cutoff treaty to include verification procedures. And he could support the International Atomic Energy Agency in its efforts to strengthen the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Having helped build our nuclear arsenal, I believe that I have a special responsibility to help dismantle it.
I'm very proud to have been asked to co-chair the Genocide Prevention Task Force with former Secretary of Defense Bill Cohen, and we had a terrific commission. The central premise of our task force report is that genocide is unacceptable and that we can and should do more to prevent it. The United States should treat the elimination of genocide as a top foreign policy priority. This duty should be part of the daily job description of every Foreign Service officer, AID official, overseas military commander, and member of our intelligence community. There's a vast gap between the Marine Corps and the Peace Corps, and we need to fill that gap with agencies and people who specialize in law, governance, development, peacemaking, and the creation of lasting democratic institutions.
This is not security as usual or development as usual, nor is this about what we've come to think as peace building or peacekeeping. This is about securing development, bringing security and development together first to smooth the transition from conflict to peace, and then to embed stability so that development can take hold over a decade or longer. So whether it's building a consensus in Liberia, taking on corruption in Haiti, or facing the risks of opium production in Afghanistan, strong and decisive national leadership matters. Even the best-laid development plan will flounder on the back of national indifference. Secure development requires national ownership. Outsiders can help, but they can't substitute for local ownership and responsibility.
That once the new administration takes office, it will be desirable to undertake serious regional consultations with all of Iraq's neighbors regarding the security consequences of U.S. disengagement and the implications of such for them. Insofar as Afghanistan itself is concerned, it is my view that the United States has to be very deliberate in avoiding the mistakes that the Soviet Union made in Afghanistan. The enterprise, thus paradoxically, is turning in a direction painfully reminiscent of what the Soviets experienced. It is therefore my view that while we may have to deploy some additional forces to deal with specific problems in specific regions of Afghanistan, the real emphasis is needed. The real emphasis should be put on a strategy of seeking decentralized political accommodation with those elements of the Taliban that are not committed to the more global terroristic aspirations of al-Qaeda, but are focused more specifically on domestic Afghan concerns, elements which have a view of society very alien to us, one that we instinctively and naturally repudiate, but views which do not represent by themselves the kind of threat that al-Qaeda has imposed on the United States.
I agree with Dr. Brzezinski that Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, in whichever order you wish to take them, are all extremely important countries in what might be called an expanding Middle East, and will undoubtedly be competing for pride of place on the agenda of the next US administration. If all four countries have serious problems, which country in the world doesn't? Afghanistan is probably the only one where practically all the people in and outside of government recognize that their country is facing a grave internal crisis, and they cannot overcome their difficulties without the support of others. For sure, neither NATO nor the US see themselves as a foreign force of occupation in Afghanistan. And earlier on, at the beginning, the overwhelming majority of the people of Afghanistan did not look at them that way either. But that situation is changing, I'm afraid, and it's not the Taliban only who are now wondering if these foreign forces are friendly forces the way ISAF was in 2002 and 2003, or whether US and NATO forces are occupying forces in the same manner as the Russians were in the 1980s, or in the way the international coalition is in Iraq at present. Consequently, the alternative for these foreign forces is clear enough. To succeed in changing their image and do what it takes to convince once again the people of Afghanistan that they are not there to dominate, humiliate, or persecute, but to help rebuild the state institutions, develop the economy, and bring peace and stability for all.
Bush era in Iraq was liberation, security, security, security. Obama era should be strategic relationship, more holistic relationship, economy, education, cultural, scientific, religious relationship with the United States. We need to cement this strategic relationship with the United States so that we will firmly say, and hand on heart saying, that Iraq is firmly, with concrete feet, heading west, flying west. We need to move on from one era, from one phase of the last 6 years to another phase of a long-lasting, durable, enduring relationship with the United States of America. Disengagement in security is one thing, but do not disengage from Iraq in all aspects.
As far as governance of the economy and polity in Afghanistan is concerned, we are at a fork between two known roads. The first is the road of narcotics, criminalization of the economy, corruption of governance, and the erosion of trust of the population, leading to prolonged conflict, instability, and violence. According to various indices, Afghanistan is now the fourth most war-torn country, the fifth most corrupt country, and the seventh most fragile state in the world. As a result, media commentary in the West is increasingly focusing on this vicious circle. The second alternative road, however, is predicated on a competitive economy revolving around agriculture, mining, and services, an effective state that performs core functions for its citizens, and a national identity that renews the tolerant and cosmopolitan values of Afghanistan's Islamic civilization and embraces a place in our global society. Taking this road will not only lead to peace, prosperity, and stability, to a virtuous circle, but will turn Afghanistan into a bridge between the Islamic and Western worlds.
Afghanistan is obviously a topic of enormous importance, not just to the United States, as Ashraf made very clear, but to all the alliance coalition countries and the world. Achieving progress, needless to say, will take time. And our commitment, including our combat forces, enablers, training teams, and others, will have to be sustained. Our commitment must also extend well beyond the security realm. To be sure, it's vital that the coalition and our Afghan partners arrest and then reverse the downward spiral in security. Doing so, however, will require progress not just in the security arena, but in a host of other areas as well. In development of infrastructure and building governmental capacity and reducing corruption and other practices that undermine governmental legitimacy, and in development of the rule of law that Ashraf also highlighted. And in the year ahead, of course, we'll also have to help our Afghan partners conduct and secure national elections that are seen to be legitimate by the people of Afghanistan. We must seek to build and support relationships at every level of endeavor, local, provincial, national, and regional. And as we go forward, it will be incumbent on all of us to demonstrate that the United States and the coalition of countries engaged in Afghanistan are reliable, determined, and consistent partners. Again, partners, not occupiers, another point that Ashraf underscored. The United States and the other members of the coalition have important national interests in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and their neighbors. The common national security imperatives highlighted by 9/11 and by subsequent attacks in a number of other countries still exist. Sanctuaries in which transnational extremists recruit, train, plan, and organize for operations cannot be permitted. This security imperative, though, requires a comprehensive, coordinated, and sustained approach that reflects an unwavering commitment to the region, one that, if properly executed, can help promote security, stability, and over time, growing prosperity. Thank you very much.
Let me first say what I think Afghans want. And I think the first thing Afghans want is security and a modicum of rule of law. I think Afghans want food security, which they don't have at this moment. They want employment. They want better governance at the center and in the provinces and districts. On reconciliation, it is urgent that the government of Afghanistan defines its framework, establish a central point in the President's office to direct contacts or talks with the Taliban. It is also essential to define who in the Taliban one will be talking to. Perhaps, I would believe, starting with the field commanders. It is necessary also to define red lines for these talks. It is also essential that we decide what, and the government of Afghanistan decides, what price the Afghans will have to pay for reconciliation with the Taliban. And it would be excellent if the US were also to make it clear that it is not seeking long-term military bases in that country. Finally, about Europe, it will be a hard job to do, even if at the beginning there will be willingness by Europeans to listen to the Obama administration in a way they didn't listen to the Bush administration. But the more Americanized the war becomes, the less likely it is that you will find European countries, with the exception probably of the UK, willing to send more forces or to have a greater commitment in the country. And finally, the UN. The UN needs to be kept in mind. The UN should be the central coordinator of our efforts in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
What we need is to couple an increased international and U.S. troop presence with what I would call an accountability offensive. We need a serious accountability offensive in Afghanistan. And we need it not just in sort of creative governing solutions like a civilian embed program and local and regional governance modeled on the very successful military embed program that has been going on there. But I mean at least considering some higher risk, higher return efforts at challenging the fundamental issue of corruption. We need to keep in mind with this that warlordism, which I would admit is an overgeneralized term, is nonetheless more of an exogenous than an endogenous presence in Afghan governing structures. We do need to look to empower jirgas, ulamas, other parts of the local governing structure. But the answer right now is not to empower them by militarizing them, but by removing the threats to their power, namely some of these systematic elements of corruption that are going on.